Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second, and it makes a massive difference. Today's video is on a topic that I honestly don't know why I didn't cover at the time, and that is, did Giannis choke in the 2019 Eastern Conference Finals against the Toronto Raptors? Back in 2019, Giannis had his first real playoff debut as a superstar player with a competent team and system around him to make it further than the first round, and as a result, with his first time on the biggest stage after having won an MVP, all eyes were on him and how he would perform. And unfortunately, Giannis did not play well versus the Toronto Raptors for a variety of reasons that we are going to go over in this video, but I think for the most part, people give Giannis a pass because this was his first real time in the playoffs, but also there are people who are like, he was a superstar and he just won MVP, so they expected more. And that's fair. So I wanted to look at two things. Was Giannis's underperformance really on him, or was it a handful of factors outside of his control? And more importantly, should this underperformance be cause for concern down the line? Should Giannis's underperformance in the 2019 Eastern Conference Finals be cause for concern to believe that maybe he will repeat that in the playoffs in the future, and Giannis's game as it stands now is just simply not good enough? Let's talk about it. Before we can get to anything, let's first take a look at how Giannis actually performed in this conference finals. Giannis in that series averaged 22.7 points a game, 13.5 rebounds, 2.7 blocks, and 5.5 assists, shooting 45% from the field while also averaging 4.2 turnovers a game. And those numbers were not even close in comparison to the numbers he was putting up in the regular season and even in the playoff games before the Raptors series. In the regular season, Giannis averaged 27.7 points a game, 12.5 rebounds, and 5.9 assists per game on 58% shooting from the field. So Giannis for this series averaged 5 less points per game on a 13% worse shooting from the field. That's very notable. And then in the playoffs before the series, Giannis averaged 27.4 points per game on 52% shooting, which is 0.3 less points than the regular season and 6% worse from the field. So there was a drop off, but it wasn't all that noticeable. Basically the same point production with just slightly worse efficiency. But then in the conference finals, the 6 most important games that he had played up until this point in his career, and he did not do well. But this goes far past stats. It's very often that a player seems like they're having a good game, but then you look at the box score and they really aren't. This was not the case. In this case, he was statistically playing questionably and looking even worse doing it. But I don't think this was on Giannis as much as many people like to make it. Now, full disclosure, Giannis is tied for my first favorite player in the NBA that is not a Chicago Bull. So I might have some bias here, though I would like to think I'm pretty good at being objective. Maybe I'm lying to myself there because I've also been called incredibly biased in the past, although that can be a two-way street because often someone can be so biased they think that you're biased, but whatever. I'd like to think I'm objective, but if you disagree, then fine. But I don't think the result of the 2019 Eastern Conference Finals, as well as Giannis's box score stats, really were all that much on him, at least to the degree that people like to say it is. I think there were 3 main factors outside of Giannis's control that contributed to how he played in that series and the fact that the Raptors won. First of all, Giannis's teammates sucked ass in this series as well, which as a whole made things a lot harder for Giannis. And then 2, Toronto built pretty much a perfect anti-Giannis defense that most teams in the league could not do. They had the size, they had the game plan, and because his teammates were not making shots, it was easy for them to execute it. 95% of teams could not pull that off. And 3, and what I believe is the biggest factor, is Mike Budenholzer made no adjustments when he came across his players playing poorly and Toronto playing great defense. Instead, he just let them do the same thing over and over again, which resulted in the loss. So let's address these in order. First of all, Giannis's teammates sucked ass in the playoffs. Now, I think we all know that Eric Bledsoe is a horrible playoff underperformer. He is so trash in the playoffs, in fact, that I don't even consider him to be a good player because he is that bad in the playoffs that I don't care what he does in the regular season. In this series, he averaged a grand total of 10 points on, get this, 29% shooting from the field and 17% from three. This dude took 68 shots in this series and made 20 of them. But it wasn't just Bledsoe. We all knew that he was going to play like shit. He never ceases to prove people wrong about that. Brook Lopez did look pretty good in the box score for this series, but he was not hitting his threes, which was his most valuable contribution. Chris Middleton wasn't absolutely trash, but he certainly underperformed. 14.7 rebounds and 4 assists on 41% shooting. Malcolm Brogdon and George Hill are really the only players I would say performed at their level or above. Nikola Mirotic shot 34%. Ersan Ilyasova shot 28% from three. Both of these guys played 100 minutes in this series. If you've noticed that I've been harping on their three-point percentages here, that's because I am. The team as a whole shot 31% from three in this series when this was a three-point shooting team. This is important because the Bucks' game plan, the most baseline, basic understanding of what they were doing, was putting shooters around Giannis, and when those shooters are not hitting, Giannis becomes less effective. They shot 35% from three in the regular season. Brook Lopez shot 37% from three on 7 attempts. Chris Middleton shot 38 on 6 attempts. Brogdon shot 43% on 4 attempts. This was a three-point shooting team that couldn't hit shit in this series, so as a result, the Raptors felt a lot more comfortable establishing a defensive system that allowed them to shut down Giannis. It's a lot easier to bring help to stop Giannis when you are very confident that the guy he's going to pass it to is going to brick his shot. And using this as a transition to the second point, the Toronto Raptors built a perfect defense to stop Giannis. And that defense went well beyond one player, which I think was the key thing there. See, the Boston Celtics in Game 1 in the second round against the Bucks actually gave them a bit of a scare, beating them by 22 points on Milwaukee's home court with Giannis struggling. He only put up 22 points on 33% shooting. That was because Al Horford played some great one-on-one defense against Giannis, but the thing is, when you are as good as Giannis is, one defender can't hold you for too long. So after that game, he averaged 30 points per game on 58% shooting in the series. Outside of Horford, the Celtics just couldn't keep up. But in the case of Toronto, they had Marc Gasol, Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka, and of course, Kawhi Leonard. And they played big around Giannis. Serge Ibaka at this point in his career was really a center, but there was still plenty of time he was playing power forward with Marc Gasol in the game, so they had two huge guys to put around the basket. So that personnel alone is nuts, but what made this really effective was Nick Nurse built a defense that took advantage of these guys' size, skill, athleticism, and defensive IQ. Ibaka and Marc are big and smart defenders. Pascal is physically maybe the best matchup against Giannis in the league. I wouldn't say he was a great defender because of the other aspects of his defensive game, but he was certainly a very good one with the size and length to match Giannis. And of course, Kawhi is Kawhi. And while yes, on the surface level, it appears that Giannis has a lot of size on Kawhi Leonard, one, as I said, Kawhi is Kawhi, but two, Kawhi has a long wingspan and hands bigger than Paul Pierce's ego. So it was a good matchup against Giannis. But Toronto took these four and built a wall in front of the basket. Donald Trump would have been very proud. Now, having up to 3 defenders in and around the paint in 2019 can be a really big issue because you are vulnerable to a lot of three-point shooting, but as I said earlier, his teammates were not hitting those threes. That's not to say that the gamble worked out in their favor every time. There was plenty of times where it bit them, but based on how everyone was performing, it was a nice bet to make, and it ended up working out clearly. So Giannis' teammates were not hitting their shots, and as a result, the defensive scheme of the Raptors was more effective than it would have been and more prevalent than it would have been because of them missing those shots. So what did the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, Mike Budenholzer, do about this? Well, what is war good for? Absolutely nothing. That was horrible. See, Giannis has a pretty clear weakness in his offensive game that goes beyond just his standstill jump shot. He can't really create shots that are not layups and dunks to begin with because of his lack of a jumper, has no mid-range game on top of the lack of three-point game. So as a result, if Giannis is not getting to the basket when he's taking his defender one-on-one, he really is not all that effective. But there are ways to get around this with the position he plays. See, I think people often forget because of how unique of a player Giannis is that he is a big man. He's definitely not your traditional big man, but he's a big man. He's a guy who posts up a lot. He is a good pick and roll player. He can cut to the basket. He's good at catching alley-oops, especially on the fast break. Because of this, Giannis had nearly half of his shots assisted this season, which is pretty typical of a big man of his caliber. But I found myself as a neutral party who was rooting for a close game and nothing else, getting frustrated as I watched Giannis come up the court, everyone else on the team stare at him, while he dribbles into the wall and either gets up a bad shot or kicks it to Chris Middleton, who bricks it. And they did this over and over and over and over again. Budenholzer could have got Giannis in the pick and roll to get him some easy buckets. Maybe he gets the roll or he just gets a mismatch that he can post up. Have Giannis do a back cut with some action at the top of the key serving as a distraction. I'm just spitballing here, but the point is you have to do something. And this goes past Giannis as well. As I was saying, the other players on this team were struggling, so try to run some plays that are going to get them some easier looks, because right now what you are doing is not working. Every defense has its weaknesses. Every defense has more than one defense, which the obvious defense with this scheme was the open shots, but because they were missing those, that didn't matter. But you can still make some adjustments to try and find other weaknesses. What you can't do is nothing. See, Coach Budenholzer is a good coach. He won Coach of the Year for a reason. He also, as a side note, always looks like he was just told that his wife slept with the pool boy while he simultaneously is shitting his pants in every single photo of him. It's truly remarkable. Like, seriously, look at this. But even though I'd say Mike Budenholzer is a very good coach, I would not say otherwise. Also, he made a critical flaw that is pretty basic in coaching, which is you have to make adjustments when things aren't working. Even after you try to force it to work, if it's still not working, you make changes. Doing nothing is not an option. You must do something to try and counter Toronto's defense. But Bud did nothing, so Giannis and the Bucks struggled offensively all series, and now it looks like Giannis choked when in reality, it was three things outside of his control that caused his performance. Now, that's not to say that there is no blame on Giannis. Sure, he could have made some of those adjustments himself, regardless of what Bud wanted him to do. But at the end of the day, I really don't think this performance is on Giannis to nearly the degree it is on those three factors that I mentioned. And unless Giannis is facing a defensive team like this Raptors team and his teammates are not making the shots when he's passing it to them, I doubt this is going to happen again. Luckily for Bucks fans, there are really only two teams in the Eastern Conference I think could potentially do this, but I don't think they really will, and that is the Sixers and again the Raptors. Even though they don't have Kawhi, they now have OG Anunoby, who is a pretty damn good defensive player. But hopefully this time around, if that happens, Giannis's teammates will hit their shots. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.